Good morning, everybody. It is Friday. We are here to get you to the weekend. Some great stuff coming up on the next 2 hours of Gojo and Golic. March Madness Day 1 has come and gone. How's everybody's brackets looking? Busted? That's what we thought. We'll see how the guys' brackets did after Day 1. Plus, DK spoke about his transition to the Steelers. He had some words for the Seahawks. We'll break that down. Plus, one quarterback is darting up in the mock drafts. Who is it and why? We'll get into all that on Gojo and Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Gojo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield here with you guys. Happy Friday. Fun show coming your way, as always. Download, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating, and watch us here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the Gojo and Golic YouTube channel. Sweet Lou Riddick is coming to join us in the 9 o'clock hour of the show. Talk about who won free agency, some of the prospects in this draft that he's most intrigued by, how you approach this time in the NFL calendar as a former NFL front office member, what it's like once you get through the bulk of free agency and start to turn your eye on the draft. All of those things we can get to with Lou after we bask in the glow of what we got yesterday, Dad. We talked about one of the best sports weekends of the year, the loss in productivity, people getting vasectomies so they can hang out at home, all of the most exciting action that turned out a day that had enough of the upsets that we craved, some very good games. It birthed us a matchup in the second round that I think everybody had circled on their bracket as soon as we got started. So, Dad, there is no doubt the beginning of March Madness yesterday that continues today, an absolute coup as always for people that want to sit at home, park their asses, and fuse to the couch.
I mean, it was everything it was cracked up to be. I sat in front of that TV from basically noon till right around 11 o'clock. I mean, just basking in the glory of the NCAA Wrestling Championship. That's right. That's right.
Jesus Christ.
The NCAA Wrestling Championships are going on right now. Now, I did flip and I watched some basketball, but let's be honest, there were a lot of blowouts in the basketball. But man, was the wrestling electric. They go the first 2 rounds on Thursday, 2 more rounds today, and then the finals on Saturday night. It was fantastic. If you would just give me a moment to bask in the glory of NCAA wrestling. For those that don't know, I wrestled in high school and I wrestled at Notre Dame. My brother Bob wrestled at Notre Dame. I love wrestling. And just to give you just a quick synopsis, if I may, Mike, we talk about domination in sports. We talk about, is it good for sports? Is it bad for sports? We talk about a team domination or an individual domination. Penn State Wrestling has dominated since 2011. They have won 11 of the last 14 national championships. They've won 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 22, 23, and last year 24. There are 10 weight classes in wrestling. Penn State got somebody in every weight class. So there were 2 rounds yesterday. They went 20-0. They did not lose a match. Their coach, again, just for some history, their coach is, and there's 32 wrestlers in every bracket. Their coach is Cale Sanderson, who went 159-0 in college at Iowa State, won 4 national championships, won a gold in Athens in the Olympics, and he's been their coach since 2009 and just dominated. And let me just add, I know people are going to be like, God, seriously, wrestling, but I'm giving it its due, okay? I'm giving it its due. Gable Steveson, the heavyweight who came back after winning 2 NCAA championships, going to the WEE, trying out for the Buffalo Bills. He won a gold medal. He had another year of eligibility. He came back. He's crushing everybody. But there was a first in college wrestling. There are 5 sets of brothers who are in the tournament. Only 1 set of brothers is on different teams. And by the way, those 2 brothers wrestle in the same weight class, and for the first time in NCAA wrestling history, they wrestled each other in the second round last night. Luke Stout, the 11 seed from Princeton, against Mac Stout, his younger brother, the 6 seed from Pitt. Mac won at 5-2. So there was the first time ever that brothers wrestled in the championship, even though there have been sets of brothers all the time, mostly on the same team. They were on 2 different teams. I mean, how nervous are the parents? I just think of a parent, the dad and mom, sitting in the stands like, what the hell are we supposed to do here?
I was going to ask if they showed shots of the parents in the stands, because we obviously went through a version of this with the Kelsey Bowl and the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, but as is well documented, Jason and Travis don't actually go up against each other. We had some of that in the past with Chris and Kyle Long in stages that didn't have that gravitas necessarily. They were still playing against each other in the NFL. And Dad, even you and your brothers, my Uncle Greg played offensive line and was a year older than you at Notre Dame, so you guys had to go up against each other in practice some, I would imagine, but did they show the parents during this?
Actually, they didn't, and the parents had split. You know, one going to the because one is at Princeton, so their championship before the NCAAs, and the other at Pitt. So they flip-flopped. One year the dad went with one son and then went with the other. The mom, they flip-flopped as well, but they could be here together. And the younger brother's the better wrestler. He was seated higher, and he won. But, I mean, going up again in the most one-on-one sport, like boxing, like MMA, wrestling is just pure one-on-one, you and the other guy. And you're right, and there have been tons of brothers who have played together and on separate teams in the NFL. You mentioned my brother Bob when he was with the Browns and I was with the Oilers and Eagles. We played against each other, but we were both on defense. But when I was with the Oilers, Hall of Famer Bruce Matthews, who played every position on the O-line, was at left tackle, and Clay Matthews, his brother, played with my brother in the Browns, so they actually went against each other, you know, in rundowns and pass situations all the time. But man, I can't imagine just 2 brothers wrestling. I mean, as the announcer said, probably the last time they wrestled together was growing up in the living room, moving the furniture,
right?
You know, and doing that, because they have never faced each other in competitive wrestling until last night. So that was actually pretty cool. Unless you're a parent.
I'm sure the last time they wrestled, they were getting yelled at by their parents to stop, because they probably weren't supposed to be doing it. And now they were being cheered by thousands of people, if not more, while they did it for a championship event in the NCAA. No, I'm sure that was electric in a lot of ways, and unsurprising. The brand of you, I have always said to people, if push came to shove, I actually think you like wrestling more than you like football. It just so happens you were very good at football, and football also ends up paying a lot better than wrestling beyond collegiate wrestling does. So all that worked out well there. Not surprising that you would drift into the loving arms of NCAA wrestling on day 1 of March Madness. Even though I will say, in your defense, day 1 of March Madness, as we look down the results, a lot of it unsurprising here. Both 1 seeds in Auburn and Houston move on yesterday. Both 2 seeds in Tennessee and St. John's. Both 3 seeds in Wisconsin and Texas Tech. And both 4 seeds in Purdue and Texas A&M. All move on in varying degrees of entertainment. Most of those games didn't feel like they were well in doubt for a lot of the time here. As we went on down, Dad, the close games were a little fewer and further between yesterday. There were some good upsets in the mix. There were some good storylines that we'll get to. But overall, yesterday, I think we'll be leaning heavily on today to provide us with the fireworks that we're used to. Because even the upsets that we saw, Dad, 11-seed Drake over 6-seed Missouri as an upset, 12-seed McNeese over 5-seed Clemson. Those were a lot of the ones that all of the experts identified going into the tournament and said, hey, these teams all have the ability to go and make a little bit of a run here to potentially the round of 32 or the Sweet 16. And so we didn't see anything that seemed overly surprising yesterday, Dad, necessarily. It gave way to 2 things, though, that I think are important. Number 1, by nature of Arkansas taking down Kansas in a matchup already of great coaching in John Calipari and Bill Self, Arkansas going through and St. John's handling their business now nets us John Calipari versus Rick Pitino in round number 2, which everyone had circled on their bracket in the lead up to this event. So fired up for that one. And then the other interesting one, Dad, was McNeese, because we said yesterday going into this matchup, a 12-5 where a lot of people had circled McNeese as one of the teams that was capable of making a run. Will Wade, the head coach of McNeese, the former LSU head coach, quality coach, tournament experience, all these things that could lend themselves well. And Clemson just coming out and absolutely pooping their pants at the beginning of that game. What a poor showing for the ACC to start the NCAA tournament, who's now going to lean heavily on North Carolina, of all teams, to salvage their image. But, Dad, we weren't sure because Will Wade, right before the tournament it was announced, is expected to take the North Carolina State job after the conclusion of McNeese's run in this tournament. And so we weren't sure what it was going to look like. And boy, oh boy, while the final score is 69-67, Dad, it hardly felt that close for the vast majority of that game. McNeese had come out and really rattled Clemson, running kind of a match zone that Will Wade said they hadn't run the majority of the year, that really bothered the length of Clemson, who was a much bigger, longer team than McNeese. But the quickness, the athleticism, and the experience and the coaching of this team, Dad, gave way to an upset that I was really impressed by the ability of Will Wade, these players, to all compartmentalize the situation that they were in and go out and absolutely thunder punch Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, this was a game basically 7 minutes in was 6.5, 7 minutes in was 8-6. I mean, there was just no scoring. And then McNeese just, as you said, thunder punch Clemson 31-13 at halftime. Clemson had 13 points at halftime. And they made it look closer than it was. Clemson put up actually 54 in the second half. So you're right. The news about the coach was more impactful. That was a good game. Arkansas and Kansas. You mentioned Calipari moving through to face St. John. There's going to be more coaching shots in that game than probably of any game, including the championship game, for Calipari on one sideline and Patino on the other. But that was a hell of a game. I mean, Kansas had the lead with 5 minutes to go. They lose one of their top players in KJ Adams. And Arkansas goes on a 15-5 run late. Luckily, I picked. Actually, I didn't. I didn't pick Arkansas on my main sheet. I went 11-5 on my main sheet. On all my other sheets, I did as well as 13-3 in one sheet and as bad as 9-6 on one sheet of the, I think, 8 or 10 sheets I have filled out. But on the main one, I went 11-5. So I was somewhat happy with myself. I took a flyer on Clemson going 2 rounds, so I lost them for the next round. And I listening to Joe Lunardi, I picked VCU and I should have gone VCU and Drake. I picked VCU and not Drake, and Drake's the one who win, and VCU's the one who lost. BYU looked very good, and I picked VCU to go 2 rounds, so I lost them in the second round. My South region is clean. Auburn, Creighton, Michigan, and Texas A&M. That's the only region I had where I'm still undefeated.
I also went 11-5 on my main bracket. I am not going to get through the specifics of it right now, but it was a day that I felt pretty good about. A couple of swings and misses that don't go very far that shouldn't hurt me too bad. But, Dad, you mentioned a couple of the misses in here. Backing the ACC, do so at your own peril. Creighton, who is just money. If you're not picking Creighton in the first round at the very least of the NCAA tournament, you're making a mistake. The Blue Jays always have juice for the first round. Beyond that, it gets a little hairier. But Louisville and Clemson both completely pooping the bed. Duke is really going to have to put on for their city. It sounds like Cooper Flagg's going to be good to go and everything should be hunky-dory with the ankle heading into the tournament. But now Duke and North Carolina, the rivalry that ESPN made sure was on TV, even in a year where it fell down, now have to go out here and shoulder the load for the entire conference because Clemson and Louisville decided to forget how to play basketball when it got to these big moments here. You feel for the kids, but, Dad, it just sort of underscores the conversation that we had about the ACC going into the tournament in a down year for this team where Joe Lunardi had been highly critical of the conference and their approach to basketball, and a conference that has been the college basketball conference of note for so long. It was a head scratcher for them. They still have a chance. Like if Duke goes and wins a national championship, the ACC is going to get to do the things that most conferences do and yell about the letters when most of the conference is not very good. But it's still a far departure from what they've been for the majority of my adult life, and that was jarring to see.
Yeah. Only, as you mentioned, 2 teams left. They had 4, and they lost Louisville, Creighton. They have 2 left, and one had to get in on a play-in game in North Carolina, and now people have them like Jay Williams from ESPN has a North Carolina Duke, not shockingly, North Carolina Duke championship game going. They could possibly meet in the title game, but I doubt that's going to happen. And it's still what's interesting to me is the stat we provided yesterday that the conference with the most teams in it has never won the national championship. That is going to be interesting this year because the previous record was the Big East at 11. And this year, it's SEC and 14 teams. 14 shots to win a title. And if there was a year where that was going to be broken, where where the team with the most in the tournament didn't win, it would be this year. Because I'm sure there are those that have Auburn winning the title, those that have Florida winning the title, maybe some have Tennessee winning the title. There's a couple of ACC or SEC teams that could go the whole way.
It seems like there are also a couple that got blitzed pretty hard the other day. Gonzaga, I tell you what, I know we sort of joked about, Alex Kirshner, a friend of the program who has backed Gonzaga pretty much every year to win the title. They came out strong against Georgia, Dad. That was some dog-on-dog crime. And Gonzaga just, Mark Few's bunch, lighting it up from beyond 3 in this game. I think they had, let's look at how many made threes for Gonzaga in this. 12 made threes by the Bulldogs, the Gonzaga Bulldogs, not the Georgia Bulldogs, in that game that was never really overly close. So there were some of the, the bottom half there, Missouri obviously losing as well, that were going to maybe be the wheat separated from the chaff type deal. Right. But I'm with you, Dad. Just so many tickets to the lottery for the SEC in this one. It feels like it's going to be hard. And then there's the stuff that we always look for, Dad, in March Madness. Where are those unknown stars going to come out from? Where are the players and the stories that you're going to be able to latch on to? Amir Khan, the manager for McNeese, gets to march on another day. Yeah. He's getting interviewed left and right with the boombox after. The players really seem to embrace it. I sometimes bristle when some of the Sister Jean figures become bigger stories than the players actually playing, but this seems to be a good balance, and the team really seems to love when he gets involved. But, Dad, how about BYU's Richie Saunders? This one speaks right to our heart. He's the great-grandson of the inventor of the tater tot. Orida, the company that now has an NIL sponsorship with him, was looking for a way to try and get more tater tot history and their story told to the masses, and looked and realized after a conversation that Richie Saunders was actually the great-great-grandson of the man who invented the tater tot, and so they inked an NIL deal with him that for every tournament win that BYU notches, will provide free tater tots to the nation. There'll be a link live on their website for a certain period of time after the game where people can go and get free tater tots. So, Dad, I love to see this sort of pro-spud conversation being initiated, all because we got some kid playing basketball who's got the right bloodlines.
Dude, what bloodlines, right? All right, tater tots? I mean, those are, who doesn't love? Jesse, please tell me you like tater tots.
Yeah, I like potatoes in pretty much any form, but I'm not going to buy frozen tater tots.
All right.
Oh no, but if you're out and about, a tater tot hate to see you coming type.
A tater tot hate to see me coming. I love potatoes.
Listen, tater tots are like potato chips. You can't eat just one. You just pop them, right? Yeah. You just pop them by the handful or forkful, whatever you want to do.
Tater tot or hash brown, though? Who wins in a battle royale?
It's basically the same thing.
But they're different.
Right?
Yeah. A tater tot's just a portable hash brown. It's just one you can take on. It's a grab-and-go hash brown, and that is the beauty of the spud. Coming up next, we will hear from McNeese head coach Will Wade about his future and the approach with his team that led to a tournament win next. Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. A happy birthday to James Martinez in the chat on YouTube. Thank you to everyone who checks us out over there every day live watching the show along with us here. The show staff has been completely overtaken by an innocent throwaway question about the preference of breakfast potatoes. The hash browns versus tater tots debate has racked our brains throughout this break. At Gojo and Golic on Twitter, you can vote there as we got to this because Richie Saunders from BYU found, by the way, how about this? Like, short of being told, if you told me growing up as a fat kid in central Connecticut, short of being tapped when I was 13 and being told, Mike, Hogwarts is real. You're actually a wizard, and we're going to take you over there to learn how to use your magic. Short of that, being tapped on the shoulder the way that Richie Saunders was at some point during his collegiate career this year and told, you are actually the great-grandson and the heir of a tater tot empire, I don't know if it gets much better than that, Dad. Access to spuds like that in a beautiful form for the rest of your life, I'd imagine now, by way of this partnership, has got to hit different.
I think there's two times for him. One, when he was told he is part of this empire and the bloodline of this empire, and then two, when he understands the ramifications of it, when he really gets it of this is good. This is going to be really good for me for the rest of my life. So I would agree. I mean, and plus, I mean, tater tot. I mean, it's not a company or something owned that basically you can't use or maybe you don't like to use, but it sells great and the company's great. This is something that's just awesome. But I wonder if you own donut shops, do you become sick of donuts? If you're in the tater tot, industry, do you get tired of tater tots? Are there always tater tots at the house? I don't know. I don't know. We've never been in that position. So, yeah, I don't know. But I wonder if you get tired of them, Jesse.
I'm just a little confused, though. What do you mean he found out his great-grandfather founded Orida? Like, what? Was he the long lost? Like, Is there a trust fund attached to this? Like, I'm a little confused about the whole thing. Like, oh, it's so silly. We just found out. Like, what do you mean?
So basically how it went down, there's an article in the Salt Lake Tribune by Kevin Reynolds that talked about the process that led to this moment. And essentially the family at this, the Tater Tot family in here, whose last name is Grigg, Neffy Grigg, was the inventor of the Tater Tot and the one that founded this company. And apparently his relatives, his more direct relatives, were looking for a way to get more of the tater tot history told to people, to museums and other places, and they were having trouble getting inroads on that. And then one day in a conversation, someone realized that a slightly more distant relative, it was someone's second cousin's son, was this basketball player at BYU. And that was when they realized they hadn't, I guess, had the full fleshed out tater tot family tree. And so they realized through a conversation that Richie Saunders was actually related to Neffy Grigg, the tater tot inventor. And so after that, that was when they brokered the NIL deal with him and basically used college basketball now as the vessel to tell the story of tater tots to the masses.
I just feel like he's got an NIL deal, but I don't know. I feel like he should have a piece of the company. I think he should get some lawyers and look into it.
I want equity. I want
equity. Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Do we know if he's in line for this company? If he's getting, if he has equity in this company or just parents?
Yeah, it says it's his great-grandpa, so he's not some random second cousin. If that's his great-grandpa who founded it, shouldn't he have some little more? They're like, we're giving you this NIL deal. It's like, oh, you're going to give me more than that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I would hope that equity was part of the negotiation, and we said, hey, I'm with you, Jesse, let's cut me in on the family trust and let's get some of this top money. We also came up with the conclusion, and I came up with this, and I don't know if you guys have co-signed it or not, that the McDonald's hash brown, one of the true joys in the fast food and one of the more unique items in the fast food multiverse. I feel like we have a lot of people that do a lot of copycat things. The McDonald's hash brown has really been singular for a long time in form and function. And really, when you think about it, the McDonald's hash brown is just the all-tot. It's one giant flattened tater tot that you get to take on the go in the little sleeve, Dad. It's the perfect weapon.
It's just, it's an oversized tater tot. It's exactly what it is, which led us in the break to start discussing, do you do a tournament-type grid for potatoes, for hash browns that are like in a restaurant, for baked potatoes, for tater tots, for the hash browns at McDonald's, for different French fries. And Mike, the last thing we said before we came back on air, can you differentiate between French fries? Yes, you can. Regular French fries and the waffle fries, the ratio of ketchup that you could put on is different, which makes them different. The waffle fries, you could put more ketchup on. So to me, that puts it in a different category than just the French fry.
Oh, listen, I would prefer, and this is God putting the cart way before the horse as we try and map out in the next week of if a potato bracket is going to be a part of that, if we wanted to delineate French fries there. Curly fries are the best cut of French fries here. Argue with the wall. This is my truth. But your point stands about the ratio of potato, much like the chocolate to peanut butter ratio in the Reese's suite of products. I digress. So at Gojo and Golic on Twitter is where you can vote. Tater tots or hash browns when it comes to at least one potato varietal matching up over the course of March Madness. I wanted to get to this, Dad. We talked about the McNeese 12-5 win yesterday. And again, riveting game, great, well-executed game plan. And that's before you even add in the backdrop of this. So for anyone that missed it, McNeese head coach Will Wade, the former LSU coach that was fired in the wake of the FBI wiretap into college basketball that exposed pay for play. Quite honestly, Will Wade got fired for being ahead of schedule. He was a part of a generation of college basketball that was doing what we do now, just at a time where it wasn't exactly legal in the way that the NCAA didn't love. And so there wasn't anything more salacious than that, even at least to my knowledge. It was purely just he got caught in a wire talking about paying players. A few years before, we decided it was okay to pay players. And so now Will Wade had begun his arc back into major college coaching, and it had brought him to McNeese, a place not all that far, down in Louisiana, Lake Charles, and had brought him a tremendous amount of success here. So much so that, Dad, what inevitably happens at a lot of these jobs, especially with a coach like Will Wade working his way back and not dealing with major scandal, is he was always going to get another opportunity. And so before the tournament, you get the news that comes out that Will Wade, after McNeese's season ends in the tournament, whenever that is expected to go and take the job at NC State. And we said yesterday, this can go one of two ways. We see this all the time in sports. The college football playoff is full of this, especially at the coordinator level, where guys will be interviewing for or expected to take jobs. And you wonder, how can you manage all of that? How can you do that in this day and age? What are the feelings of everyone involved going to be like? This is Will Wade after their win, talking about the process and the approach that he took with his team, discussing and debating his future going into this game to try and give them the best chance.
We address it head on. I talked to him Saturday about it. I said, here's where it is. Here's where we are. They talked about some of their portal stuff with me. We sat in a room. It was just me and our players, and we all talked about it. So I'm aware of what they've got going on. They're aware of what we've got going on, and you just hit it head on. So we're all on the same page with everything. Just tell it like it is. You may not always like what I got to say, but I'm going to tell you what I think. So I've always kind of been like that, and there's no need to hide it. The guys are reading it on social media. I mean, it's no secret, and I'm not going to ask them to do something I'm not willing to do. And so, I mean, it's no good if you don't address it, and if you sit there and BS them, they know they can read right through the BS.
Dad, Will Wade is kind of known for his candor in front of the microphone here. This was so refreshing as an approach to a situation that used to be the thing that we held up, Dad, pre-name, image, and likeness, pre-transfer portal of, hey, the problem with this sport and with college sports in general is coaches can up and leave and players are stuck holding the bag. We live in a day and age now where everyone's got the ability to get up and move, and I've always said over-communication and clear upfront honesty are going to be the only ways to survive in the portal era if you're a coach, and that seems to be the tack that Will Wade had here as players, and the way that they talked about this reeked of the maturity of people that were treated like adults in a conversation about the realities of the sport.
I mean, plus, like Will said, everybody knows what's going on in today's social media. So to hide from it or not to bring it out in the open is ridiculous. So he does, and I certainly come full circle. I used to feel bad for players when they didn't have this movement. And we'd always say, look at the coach. The coach can sign a 7-year deal, and a year later, he can leave for another school. So the coach can pretty much leave as a buyout, but normally the team he's going to pays the buyout and blah, blah, blah. And a player who gets recruited by that coach is there 1 year with the coach, and the coach leaves, and they're like, well, what the hell? I came here because of this coach, even though they say go to the college for the school, not the coach. We know that's not the case, that players go for the program and for the coach. Yeah. And then they're like, well, if I want to move, I got to sit a year. That's how it used to be for those that are still young and don't remember how it used to be. A player that transferred had to sit for an entire year before he could play. Well, now they have more movement because they don't have 7-year contracts, even though coaches can move. Players can move every year. So I don't feel as bad for the players when a coach does this now, because the players can do it at a higher rate. They can leave every year. They can basically transfer every single year, and they should know that going in. You know going in when you sign with a school and with a team that coach possibly can leave, but the thought is now, well, so can you. You can leave as well. So why not put it out in the open? I think it always should have been out in the open, and I hated when coaches kind of left in the cover of darkness and didn't tell their team they were leaving. I thought that was cowardly. So it should be out in the open now. I mean, everybody's making decisions. At some point, it's going to come to light. So why not just be honest with everybody?
Well, and I think at the end of the day in college athletics, when it comes to recruiting, player retention, all these things, word of mouth is always going to be your best recruiter. And if your experience from Will Wade is just this, hey, like he said, I might not always like the answer, but I knew where I stood. I knew what the reality of the situation was. And so I, as the player, can make the best decision for me, whether that's here or somewhere else. That's all you can ask for as a player. Sometimes it might suck. And in this case, for some of those guys, it might not be. Some of them might not be able to follow Will Wade to NC State the way some people are looking at this as an audition for the next job or anything like that. But Dad, all any athlete looks for, especially in that college environment where you've got so much else on your plate, you're not yet just a professional where you get to make this your livelihood, is I need clarity about the situation and an understanding of what my expectations are in this environment. And the result of that was them getting a win. So again, incredibly adverse circumstances, but for them to sit down in a room behind closed doors and not say, hey, we're going to block out the noise. I know you guys are hearing a lot of stuff right now. There is an easy party line that Will Wade could have run, an easy playbook of, hey, we're going to not worry about the noise right now. You guys are hearing a lot of stuff. We'll worry about that after the tournament. No, he looked them dead in the eye and said, hey, here's the reality. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what's coming up in the future here. Now that we all know that and have that out of the way, let's put that aside for a little bit and see if we can do something basketball-wise. And when you treat a bunch of people like adults, like they've got equity in the situation, like we've always campaigned for in this, look what the result can go be in the right circumstance. So I was really dead impressed with everyone involved and the way they handle that. And I hope more people see that and realize, hey, it can be like this if you run your program. It doesn't have to be the iron fist from the ivory tower dictating terms to everybody and having that be the only means of doing this.
Yeah, and like I said, I think the blow is softened in today's landscape of college sports, of players being able to move. So I think there's less pressure on the coach to be open with his players and deciding what they're going to do. And they take care of Clemson. They were blowing Clemson out. Clemson came back in it by scoring a bunch in the second half, but now they have a chance against number 3 Purdue? My eyes, number 4 Purdue, in the next round. And you're right. You see what kind of a run you can make before your coach is gone. And, oh, by the way, there'll be a bunch of players, I'm sure, that may transfer out as well.
And they talked about the what this is, the biggest win in school history for McNeese, what it'll do down there for them locally, all the bump that we usually see these programs get. But how about this for Will Wade? I mean, we talked about him managing this on one side as he talks about, McNeese and our university in the win after the game, as he knows he's got this hanging in the background. And also as he's playing against Clemson, which I didn't realize until going into yesterday, was Will Wade's alma mater. The guy graduated from Clemson, rooted for that team, and now came up and had to beat them in the midst of all of this. So a wild day for Will Wade and McNeese. Congratulations to them as they keep dancing. Coming up next, speaking of player movement, let's spill a little tea in the NFL next on Gojo and Golic.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., and Mike Golic Sr. So we got some new players in new places speaking on their old places, and some of them sound like they have a case of the sour apples here. We're going to start with Najee Harris, who shed some light on his time in Pittsburgh and what went wrong from his perspective.
It was just a team where, we lost Ben, we lost a lot of the O-line. We just didn't know anything on offense, really. We didn't have identity. We had a young guy coming out quarterback. I was young, the team was young, and I really didn't have nobody to almost learn from the offensive side. I think the veteran guy on that team was like a 2-3 year vet, and that's really nothing. You know what I mean? Like, he's still learning himself, and I'm coming in and I'm just trying to look for people to pick their brain off of, and it was just defensive guys. So I'll go to the defensive guys to talk to them, but it wouldn't be too much they could tell me about an offensive thing. You know what I mean? So. Through my years, I learned a lot that, only I learned firsthand. And I feel like here, we got a lot of veterans that I could learn even more stuff from. And even at the quarterback position and the O-line position, so it was an interesting year.
Okay, clearly having a vet in the locker room is important. You guys would know this better than me.
Yeah, Jesse, it's one of those things where I hear this, Dad, and I feel like there's going to be a lot of folks that look at this sideways and wonder if it's sour grapes, but nothing he said there really seemed all that out of pocket to me. I got to be honest. It was a pretty, I thought, clear-headed assessment of what had gone wrong in Pittsburgh for a while. There has not been an offensive identity there recently. It has, post-Ben Roethlisberger, been a cycle through coordinators, quarterbacks, all of whom have not been able to go and achieve anywhere near the same level of success. And so, quite honestly, Najee, there was no shot at Mike Tomlin in there. It was just an analysis of, hey, we came there at the wrong time in the Steelers franchise history if you wanted to enjoy competent offense.
100% agree. And the word you used was perfect. It was an assessment. It wasn't a criticism. There was no venom in his voice like DeMarcus Lawrence saying, I never had a chance to win a Super Bowl, in Dallas, taking shots that way. This was just an assessment, and he's right. He's right. When you look at his time there, it was young quarterbacks, young O-line, young receivers. The experience was on the defensive side of the ball. Who did you turn to on the offensive side of the ball? A lot of times you love your quarterback to be a leader, but they were all young quarterbacks. So I think it was a good assessment. The Steelers team, which has the highest tenured coach, high tenured guys on defense, and Watt, and certainly Cam Hayward, all of a sudden didn't have that on offense and still getting 500 or better records, still making the playoffs. But he's right. His assessment is actually right on.
It is. And God, you look at, because with Mike Tomlin, too, I think there were some people that maybe interpreted this as a shot at Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin's the CEO of that organization, right? And obviously a guy that cut his teeth in the defensive side of football. But Mike Tomlin is there to lead the entire organization. He's not in charge of the offense per se. And you look, it's been Matt Canada and Arthur Smith during Najee Harris's time in Pittsburgh. And we know the Matt Canada experience was one that a lot of people felt like, hey, they held on a little too long. If there was a criticism for Mike Tomlin, it was the fact that he did not make a move away from Matt Canada sooner, who was allergic to 400-yard offense games, as was well documented with the stats there. And so, yeah, Dad, I didn't take much issue at all with this with Najee. And God, if you're him, you understand what's really at the core of all this and the thing around the NFL that's the most obvious duh analysis ever. But he's walking into a situation where you feel like you got a quarterback. Like the Chargers have Justin Herbert and the Pittsburgh Steelers do not. And because of that, Najee Harris is going to go in and not feel like he's got the burden in the backfield where, listen, he was a two-headed backfield with Jaylen Warren for the last couple of years there. And on his best day, you could argue maybe Jaylen Warren was even more productive than Najee Harris was in those same circumstances. But now he's going to an environment with a coach in Jim Harbaugh where you're not taking a massive drop off in the coaching that you're getting from the top. I'd say Jim Harbaugh respected near, maybe not on the same level as Mike Tomlin, but pretty damn close overall in the sport. You're going to a place that values your position in the run game, and you're going to a place that's got a guy with a quarterback at the quarterback who's one of the most talented in the league, if not the most productive on a week in, week out basis.
Yeah, listen, the Chargers needed help at the running game. And were you surprised at all that they didn't pick up Najee Harris's option? He was there 4 years and had 4,000-yard seasons, right? I mean, basically 3 of them, the last 3, just over 1,000 yards. He played in 17 games all the years he was there, and he basically had 300 or more touches in every season when you combine carries and receptions.
Do you remember, and I wish I could remember who the Steelers were playing, but it was Monday Night Football, how Troy Aikman was just dumping all over that accomplishment for Najee Harris, talking about how in this day and age with the amount of games that we have, that 1,000-yard season for a running back is actually not all that impressed. I was just amazed. Troy Aikman every once in a while will really unload the take cannon when he's passionate about something, and he was extremely passionate about Najee Harris's yardage totals. So, no, Dad, I'm not totally surprised there. Again, given the fact that they had found production elsewhere, they're clearly investing a little more in the youth on their offensive line right now. And I do think Los Angeles is a little motivated right now to go and try and supplement at that position. They seem to also be a place that I don't know if they necessarily feel like they need a bell cow, but Najee kind of fits what they like. Gus Edwards, that big back mentality, and he's even a better athlete than Gus was, and so affords them something there. The fit made sense to me, and the departure in Pittsburgh also seemed like it was time, just given the way that relationship had seemed to go.
And I think what Troy said goes to kind of the undervalue, or I guess the value of the running back, because 1,000-yard season used to be the benchmark, right? And as I said, as I contradict myself, 3 of the last 3 years he was just over 1,000 yards and played 17 games. You have to average. Now he was splitting time with Jaylen Warren the last couple of years, but 1,000-yard rusher now, if you play 17 games, you have to average 58 yards a game, which doesn't seem like a hell of a lot to get to 1,000 yards. So certainly the value of the 1,000-yard rusher has quite honestly lost its value.
Yeah, it's definitely a different time and place, but I think all the things you mentioned there, split backfield, the production only being but above a certain level was probably not going to get your option picked up at a time where Pittsburgh is trying to figure out their offensive identity, and that still has question marks that remain at the quarterback position. So he's got questions there. Jesse, if we're going to talk about former players that had maybe a little bit of what felt like venom or something closer to that, DK Metcalf, I thought was pretty candid about some of the things that went wrong this last season in Seattle for his time at the end of his Seahawks tenure.
Yeah, he was on a podcast. Take a listen to his assessment of the situation.
I had a chance to play with some great players, man, from Russ to, Bobby to Marshawn. Got a chance to Locke as well. Got a chance to meet some greats like Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman. But, it's just time for me to move on. I think it's the grass is greener, on the other side.
That was the Got Pod with Marshawn Lynch, and they were talking about, the Seahawks there.
Well, in the larger portion of that clip that was played outside of what we got here, he talked about Dad last year, some of his frustrations in kind of, again, the identity of the team, but was a little more specific in the things that he talked about. Mentioned being one of the last remaining guys that had come up under Pete Carroll there. Talked about the ownership that he felt over his position room, him and Tyler Lockett being the veteran players in there. And told one particular anecdote about how him and Tyler Lockett at the beginning of the week on the off days would go and put all this time in game planning themselves and send some of the notes to, Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator, the quarterbacks, and the other guys in a group text, and send them the things they saw about the players they were playing against, the routes they liked against certain coverages, in hopes that that might be something involved in the game plan, the way we see all the time in the NFL, because these are professionals who are given a lot more credence with that when it comes to the way the coordinators work. And fast forward, they get to a game against an opponent that DK Metcalf had some experience with, and early in that game ended up not doing something that DK Metcalf thought was an understood, hey, we need to do this, set the tone, go deep on him early in the game. And he got in the headset and kind of got into it with Ryan Grubb a little bit, the then offensive coordinator, and then said after that, once they saw that their input wasn't going to be valued by this regime, he said they kind of shut that down and weren't going to do that extra work anymore because it wasn't rewarded. And Dad, again, Ryan Grubb, who's no longer now the offensive coordinator with the Seattle Seahawks, Clint Kubiak gets ready to take over. So clearly there were other things in that situation that Mike McDonald as the head coach didn't love. But this to me just sounds like the growing pains and change that come with, hey, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett have been used to one way of doing things that they felt had a chance for success for a long time. And while I think not valuing input from players that good. Probably a mistake if you're the coach, especially one coming from college to the NFL for the first time, to show those guys, hey, we all have equity in this. The rest of the tone of what they said just sounded like the growing pains that come with a regime change.
I completely agree. You're talking about a collegiate coach coming to the NFL. A collegiate coach, a coordinator like Ryan Grubb, is used to making up game plans really without a lot of input from players, or much less input from players in college. And in the pros, you are absolutely right. I mean, normally the OC will sit down with the quarterback to go over the best plays the quarterback likes, get input from other players, especially vets like Lockett and Metcalf, and put that all in the game plan. But Ryan Grubb was used to college where he did the whole game plan and he came up with everything. So you're right. It was kind of a sign of the times. As Metcalf said, look at all the veterans I came up playing with. The kind of the opposite of Najee Harris, right? Najee Harris got there and all of a sudden the offense got incredibly young, and Metcalf gets there and he has Russell Wilson, a guy who had been there forever. So a much different scenario of having veteran leadership to then losing all that, and a coach really not maybe in tune with helping with it, with players supplying for the game plan. And now, again, is the grass greener? I mean, is Pittsburgh going to do better than Seattle? I don't know. I mean, I think both teams could make the playoffs, but I don't see either team making a run if they do in the playoffs. I think they could be about equal.
For Najee and for DK, it's for DK, better to have loved and lost than instead of the Najee never loved at all, in terms of the offensive structure that you think helped mold you into the player you are. The funny part about what you just mentioned, Dad, is DK Metcalf is looking for all these greener pastures in the place that Najee Harris just said had an identity crisis on offense.
Yes.
Now, will DK be able to come in as this veteran force in a receiver room that right now is led by George Pickens, which has been, a coin flip depending on the day of what you're going to get out of that, and at least with a coordinator in Arthur Smith, who is a tenured veteran NFL coordinator, but one whose style of offense isn't necessarily one where we think receiver first. How's that going to mesh with DK Metcalf at this point? At the very least, Dad, you're walking into the situation. Mike McDonald was also a first-time head coach, so there was going to be understandable things that came along with that as he finds his identity as the head man in that organization, and successfully so. Like, I don't want to make this all sound like the Seahawks were a bad football team last year. They were not. They were a different football team than DK Metcalf had been used to, but it was still one that was productive when they could protect on offense, and on defense certainly saw the jump in production that you expected coming along with Mike McDonald and that defensive structure from the Baltimore Ravens. And now, Dad, for DK Metcalf, it's going and figuring out. I mean, you signed up for this before you knew who the quarterback was. Now, we know the circumstances there. We know asking for a trade, wanting the new contract, there were only going to be so many people motivated to give you that. But he has signed up for all that and pinned his greener pastures to a team that does not know who their 2025 starting quarterback is going to be right now. So certainly a risk in his happiness that he's lobbed up.
And oh, by the way, went to a team whose leading receiver was the tight end, and left a team where the three top leading receivers were the wide receivers in Seattle. Lockett, DK, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. So, I mean, he's gone and a completely different offense in Arthur Smith in what he likes to do. So it is definitely interesting where he has gone. So, I don't know if the grass is necessarily greener, especially like you said, they have no idea who a quarterback is. But he did kind of go the opposite way of Najee Harris, of going for a veteran-filled team to looking around to saying, who are the vets here?
It's one that he could potentially have more influence in, which you're seeing he clearly values, wanting to make sure that his voice and opinion are heard, which becomes all the more interesting if we play this out and game it to the full extent of what we believe in this offseason, that Aaron Rodgers is likely going to be the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. So you throw all of that in a pot, and you're cooking up a very, very interesting gumbo over on Carson Street on the south side in Pittsburgh. So fascinated to watch that social experiment play out in real time this football season. Coming up next, we get you ready for hour number 2. ESPN NFL front office insider Louis Riddick going to stop by and get us ready for the stretch run to the draft here on Gojo and Golic.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. In the Topps trading card world, the Pirates' Paul Skeens has made history. Okay, so his rookie card, a 2024 Topps Chrome Update MLB debut patch autograph card, sold for a stunning $1.1 million, including a buyer's premium. It is a record paid for a Skeens card and the most expensive modern non-Trout card. So a one-of-one Mike Trout rookie card sold for $3.9 million in August of 2020. It was the most expensive sports card of all time during that moment. I'm sure at some point Skeens will break that record too.
All right, welcome back to Gojo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield here. We're rolling along, waiting for the last few dominoes to drop in NFL free agency, but the march towards the draft really feels like it's on now in this final month stretch. And as we prepare for that, we're excited to welcome in our next guest, ESPN college football and NFL analyst, and someone who you're going to see all over the ESPN family of networks in the lead up to the draft. He's going to be a part of ESPN's full draft coverage in Green Bay all 3 days. Louis Riddick, kind enough to stop by with us today. Morning, Louis. How you doing?
I'm great. Good to see you guys again.
Always great to see you, man. We really appreciate the time. And it's an exciting time of year on that front to kind of make that transition. And, Louis, you've worn so many hats in your NFL journey over the years, from player to front office. I'm curious what this time of year is like inside an NFL team building as you're kind of getting to the end of the free agency period and really getting to that home stretch of the draft, what that looks like for you.
Yeah, it's just like a 4 or 5 week dash to try and really dot your I's and cross your T's as far as all the intel that you're trying to gather on all these guys right now. You hear all the time about general managers and personnel directors say, well, we're not really trying to tweak our board too much right now because honestly, there aren't any games being played. We should probably have most of the information that we really need at this point. So really what you're trying to guard against is, man, people coming into the process and at the 11th and 12th hour who then want to like throw their opinion in there. And next thing you know, all hell breaks loose and your board's all over the place because you got people who are listening to me, listening to Schefter, listening to whoever they're listening to, going, wait a minute, this guy's sliding, this guy's rising, this guy. No, actually, nobody's doing anything right now because nobody's playing any games. So really what you're trying to do is really kind of hone in, focus in on the people who you want, and then really trying to, quite honestly, Mike, get a feel for the market, meaning what prices do you have to pay to get to the people that you want? I mean, Jimmy Johnson said it perfectly, I believe, years ago, which is the draft is really an exercise in just kind of like identifying the people who you want and then getting yourself in position to get them. And that's really what it is. Because you should know kind of the people who you want right now, unless some kind of information comes to you that kind of just throws a monkey wrench into everything, you know, some kind of arrest, some kind of failed test, some kind of transgression that you just go, hey, wait a minute, that just caught me off guard. But you should pretty much know who you want.
Yeah, and it's like if there's a guy with a second round grade, you try and get him in the third round. You try
right.
and
Right.
squeeze at him. But so the quarterback position we know is a different position. So I'm not just going to pick on one player like a Shedeur Sanders, but even a Cam Ward going number one. Even last year when you had 6 quarterbacks going in the top 12. For quarterbacks, this rely more on your front office time and preparing for a draft. If the grade says they're not a top 12 quarterback, do you find a way to not get them in the top 12? But if it's a quarterback, do those rules kind of go out the window where they're overvalued?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's all again about Mike, about reading the market, right? You would like to not have to pay Neiman Marcus. I think this is kind of like a Bill Polian thing. You'd like to not have to pay Neiman Marcus or Saks Fifth Avenue prices for no disrespect to Target or Walmart, because I'm a big investor in Walmart, all right? But you don't want to pay premium prices for bargain basement stuff, right? You don't want to do that, but sometimes you do. Because you know there's a scarcity, right? So sometimes you just have to go and say, look, I just got to bite the bullet and do it. So you would like to try and get them where you think that fair value really resides. But the reality is, more times than not, when it comes to quarterbacks, you're just not going to be able to do that. So you have to kind of like stomach paying an elevated price and then hoping that in the end, you get the return on investment that you want, simply because you feel as though the structure you can give him, the kind of support you can give him, and really like the guy's own intrinsic, motivation is going to like help him become the kind of guy that can lead you to 12, 13, 14 wins, have you be a perennial playoff contender. And then quite honestly, nobody cares. Nobody cares if you drafted him, top 10 or 12, where reality was maybe you thought he should have went in the top of the second round. Nobody's going to care anymore because they're just saying, look, you figured it out. So it's just, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like maybe examples in the recent past where people thought maybe a guy shouldn't have been drafted where he was drafted. Like the only one I can really come up with, which is ironically, is, look, when Patrick was drafted, when Kansas City moved up to draft Patrick, or when Buffalo moved up to draft Josh, there were a lot more questions surrounding those guys than there were like concrete answers about whether or not they should be top 10 picks. There weren't many people who you could find who said Patrick Mahomes was deserving of being a top 10 pick, considering how he was kind of like a wild pony at Tech. And then next thing you know, now people are like, "Oh, I had him in the top 5 all along." Bulls. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. But that's the nature of quarterbacks. And you're dead on with that. You wind up elevating them because you know if you miss, or rather if you don't take one, and then he winds up being a hit, people are going to be going, "What were you thinking?" And then, that whole argument of I was trying to get him at what I thought was fair value, it ain't going to hold up. What's going to wind up happening is you're going to be in the unemployment line.
With this quarterback class, we know it's been largely a Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward conversation. Where do you fall on those two as prospects, Lewis, in terms of who you think could and should be the number one pick?
Yeah, I've said all along that I think Cam should be the number one prospect, and I think he's more than deserving of being that, and I think he will be taken first overall ultimately. Everything that you find out when you talk to his coaches, and I've talked to him numerous times this year, both at Miami and then the year previous out in Pullman in Washington State. The guy is self-made. He's a guy who built himself up from a zero-star recruit. He's a guy who's gone the long, hard way. So nothing's been given. Everything's been earned. And everything that he has earned, like, you can believe what you see, because from the football intellect, football intelligence, the processing on the football field, the bringing along of other people and elevating their play, the dynamic plays, different arm angles, winning inside the pocket, outside the pocket, all this stuff is unique Cam Ward. It's authentic Cam Ward. And it's the same kind of thing you're going to get when you get to the NFL, provided that everything else around him is not just crap, and you're going to take care of the kid like every quarterback needs to. And I think his career will be as good as you would hope it would be as a number one overall pick, provided all those things go his way. Shedeur is not, as I believe from a throwing perspective, as talented as Cam, but nonetheless is a starting caliber, franchise caliber quarterback who just gives it to in a different package. He has a different presentation that I know you guys have talked about and everyone has talked about. Irritates some people, doesn't sit well with some people. Their own personal biases come into play because of what his last name is, because of what his father is, because of how his father presents himself and how his father has made himself into a larger-than-life figure. It trickles down to Shedeur. He gets scrutinized with a much hotter set of lights on top of him than maybe someone else. If his name would have been Smith, he wouldn't be talked about the same way. But nonetheless, that kid has a tremendous amount of maturity, tremendous amount of mental horsepower, extremely accurate, has been coached by pro coaches, is tough as hell. He had the crap beat out of him over the past 2 years, in particular in 2023. I got to see them play multiple times. He had no shot with that offensive line. He had no shot with no running game whatsoever. Was he perfect in terms of how maybe he handled some of the adversity at all times? No. What kid is at that point in his career? They're just not. But as far as him being capable of leading an NFL franchise off the field in terms of his makeup, his leadership ability, and then on the field with his arm strength, accuracy, movement, process, he can do all that stuff. He can do it all. He's worthy of being a top 10, top 15 pick. He's gonna be a top 10, top 15 pick unless something totally blows everything out of the water and causes him to drop. And if he started dropping, there will be teams that I promise you will be moving in there in the first round trying to get him. But yeah, I think it's Cam and then Shedeur. And then after that, quite honestly, that's where it gets real interesting to me with this quarterback situation.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about, Lewis, because we've seen a lot of Jackson Dart talk recently, but I've seen you taking up the banner for Tyler Shuck. Walk me through what you've seen from the former Louisville Cardinal and amongst a number of other stopped quarterbacks, and why he's caught your eye.
Yeah, so you've noticed that, huh? You noticed I'm like maybe the president of the fan club a little bit? Yeah, I'll tell you, Tyler is a great story, but look, his journey from Oregon to Tech to Louisville, it's a long one, obviously interrupted by COVID. Obviously, that journey takes him, 7 years college football, is 25. He's going to be 26 this year. And people will automatically then point to, one, the age, and two, the injury history. Well, two of them are injuries to his collarbone, which could happen to anyone. It's not because he's bone brittle or he's injury prone. He took shots on his collarbone twice in subsequent years and he got knocked out. Then he gets hip dropped and he breaks his leg. So, these are things that, I don't know about you guys, but there isn't anything that you can really do to strengthen your bones. There isn't any machine that I've seen at the gym that can help prevent you breaking a lower extremity because someone hip drop tackles you. So let's put that aside right now. Although it's something that needs to be honored, let's set that aside. This dude at 6'4", 225, 230 plus runs 4.6 in the 40. Now I know people say who cares? Well, a lot of people care because he is a dual threat guy. He can run the football. You saw it against your alma mater. Now he got run down and got stripped at the end, but he was off to the races in that game. As a matter of fact, that game, Notre Dame showed you everything that you need to see from this guy. From the ability to throw the ball with touch, throw it with velocity, throw it with timing over the middle, throw it moving to his left, and damn near throw it underhand on an 18-yard frozen rope for a touchdown. So you've got arm angles, movement, processing, pro-style offense in Louisville with the Brom guys. He can run the football. He's got basically everything. He's got everything. The issue, what happens is, with quarterbacks, if it's not a slam dunk, prospect, surefire prospect that people can say, hey, look, it just checks every single box, then people go, either he's a franchise guy or he sucks. He's either going to lead my team to the Super Bowl or he's going to be on the quarterback carousel and out of the league in a couple of years like Josh Rosen. It's always so polarized like that. And I understand, look, a lot of times things shake out that way. This is one of those dudes, I will tell you this. You get him to a nice, strong organization that can surround him again, like every other quarterback. Tyler Shuck is going to surprise everyone in this draft. He is going to be the surprise of this draft. I like him more than Jackson, although I love Jackson. I've got to go down to Oxford a few times too, and Lane Kiffin raves about his leadership, his toughness. He broke all of Eli's records down there in Oxford. He's a guy who, every time I saw him live, I thought there were some things that he could have done faster as far as making decisions about where to go with the football instead of waiting until it was open and instead of throwing it in anticipation of it coming open. And that was something that bugged me with him. But Jackson Dart is a hell of a competitor, had a great Senior Bowl week, took on the challenge of throwing at the combine along with Tyler and looked fantastic doing it. And he is somebody there's a lot of talk about him. Maybe, Mel has him going in the top 10 now. I personally like Tyler Shuck better, but this is where it's going to get interesting as far as how people view those two guys at the 3 and 4 spot as far as quarterback rankings.
I'm with you, where the real action in the draft is going to begin and where some team, to your point, is going to take a risk and potentially be rewarded for it very well.
Yep.
On the other side. That is the kind of stuff that you can expect all in the lead up to the draft from Louis Riddick. Check him out all over the ESPN family of networks and programming. You'll see him as a part of the draft coverage in Green Bay. Louis, always great catching up with you, man. Thank you so much for stopping by this morning. Really appreciate it.
We got it, guys. Good to see you guys again.
Thanks, Louis.
Always. Dad, that game he talked about with Tyler Shuck against Notre Dame,
yep.
I remember vividly the throw he's talking about, that underhand joint to the back of the end zone, where all of a sudden it's the you lean forward in your chair meme and realize this dude's got more gas in the tank than you would have expected given the resume on paper that Louis outlined.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting with the third. There's going to be a third quarterback going in the first round. I doubt 4, but there's going to be a third. Talking to Louis, he wears so many hats and can break down so many things. And he went to Pitt, and he's just obviously such a huge Pitt fan as well. I look forward to his coverage in the draft for sure.
Yeah, it will be interesting, and I think he brings up a good point about environment and the way that that's impacted choices that did not look on paper as clear-cut as people look at them now in Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, just as maybe the two biggest examples of that. And it's a reminder, you're probably going to get more of those hits in the middle to late first where you get the better teams than you will at the top of the draft where we are reaching and maybe trying to force in the name of need. Let's take a look at what happened to the association last night here on Gojo and Golic.
Right around the corner, and we still aren't sure what to make of the two cornerstones in the Western Conference. Okay, Lakers and Warriors, they were both active at the trade deadline, landing Luka and Jimmy Butler respectively. But guys, do you think either of these teams are real threats in the West as we start creeping up on the playoffs here?
Yeah, I think the Lakers are. Bronny's going off for 17 points now. Career high last night with everybody out here, Dad. They finally got their third option in Los Angeles. Friend of the program, LeBron James, had to be looking on fondly. Now, yeah, did they lose the game to the Milwaukee Bucks? Absolutely. But this was a game they were clearly comfortable with losing based on who they had to sit and what they are trying to accomplish down the stretch of the season. But you know what? In all seriousness, good for Bronny. The dude has been the most off-scrutinized second-round pick in the recent NBA draft history. We've gone through everything he's ever done with a fine-tooth comb. And so now if we over-index a little bit on the highlight of him nailing that three-pointer off the little pick-and-roll action up top and talk too much about him scoring 17 points off the bench, I'm good with that. As someone that every once in a while kind of has to put on for my fellow Nepo babies, I'm fine with that given what this year's been like for Bronny.
Yeah, I mean, the team got smoked by Milwaukee. They had a lot of players out. And he played 30 minutes and scored 17. Listen, again, he was the 55th pick in the draft. Not many come in and star right away in the second round. It's a development time that, you know, I'm with you. I thought it was a great situation when he and LeBron played together, and we'll see how he develops. He's going to get games like this where he'll get more time as they're sitting guys toward the end of the season. But that is it's a fair question to ask. You know, with the Warriors, they just beat Toronto 16-3 since getting Jimmy Butler. Who would be able to make more of a run? And you would love, I mean, how much would the NBA love the Lakers and the Warriors to meet in the playoffs? But could either of them make a run at the conference? They certainly are better off. Golden State is better off at making a run getting Jimmy Butler, and Lakers are better off getting Luka in the trade, even though they lack a big man. So they both are in a position to threaten in the rest. I don't think anybody beats Oklahoma City in this, but they're both right there. Golden State hanging on to the 6th slot by a game and a half over the Clippers and Minnesota, and the Lakers in the 4 slot. They've fallen a couple of spots while LeBron's been out. LeBron's still missing time. They're a half a game away from being in the 5 slot and 2.5 from being in the 6 slot where Golden State is. So, yeah, I mean, they're both more competitive than they were before the trade deadline, that's for sure.
I would trust the Lakers more in the postseason than I would Golden State at this point. Especially now, I don't think this is going to be anything long term. We saw Steph took a really tough fall the other night and looked like he had, what do they call it, a pelvic contusion. He busted his ass.
Yeah.
He went up there and fell directly on his tailbone. And as someone that once under the influence jumped off a dock into water that was a little more shallow than expected and had his ass hit a rock, that's not a good time. And we're reminded how hard the surface that the basketball players play on is compared to our football field full of grass. And so we hope Steph Curry is well, but that just sort of underscores, I think, what's at the core of this, which is Jimmy Butler coming over to Golden State gave them another adult in the room in a similar way to the Luka Doncic. I don't think it's apples to apples, but it definitely was a force multiplier for them in ways I didn't predict. The thing is, it still doesn't work without Steph Curry, point blank, period. And you got this reminder that injury is built into the model for everyone. I guess the thing that's impressed me more is, out of necessity, we've seen what the Lakers look like now for a stretch of games, operated with Luka Doncic as the master and commander of everything with LeBron James on the bench. And it still functions pretty damn well. We knew Luka and LeBron's skill sets are remarkably similar. We've seen Luka get more and more comfortable with what they run in Los Angeles since he's come over. And you know, the added defensively in ways that maybe you weren't necessarily planning on, what they've done defensively since he's come over and since the trade deadline. All of that leads me to say, hey, that's actually good for them, provided LeBron comes back healthy, which is the most important factor in all of this in terms of top-end playoff success. But, Dad, I absolutely think now the way that they've been able to develop Luka and almost speed up the process because LeBron hasn't been on the court and there hasn't had to be that push and pull between the two gives me a lot more confidence in them heading into the postseason.
Be interesting. There's 12, 13 more games left in the regular season. And listen, both these teams need their stars. And LeBron, because it was a soft tissue injury, he needs to stay out as long as possible to make a run in the playoffs, even if that means they drop another spot. It's pretty close between second and there's only 4 games separating second through sixth in that. For Golden State, obviously, you want Steph healthy, and it was a tailbone. His feet slipped out from underneath him, and you could just tell the pain he was in when he hit it. They're teetering on the brink of being in the play-in. Now, how much do you want to avoid that, right? As opposed to, okay, if the Lakers drop but stay in the playoffs in the top 6, as opposed to Golden State playing for not being in the play-in games.
Yeah, I'd imagine that's a pretty significant motivator just because we've seen it's more games added on to you, right? It's potentially more, depending on where you fall in the play-in, another game or two added to the mix in a way that you'd like to try and avoid and just get to series play, get that ability to rest during that time period. So I absolutely think that's going to be a motivator. But, Dad, to your point, especially with these older teams, health is the number one thing. And if you're going to prioritize your stars' health over everything else, I think with those guys, you kind of accept wherever you fall seating-wise because you know that secondary or positioning to who's actually out on the court. And quite honestly, Dad, that's the way for a lot of the league right now. Like Tom Habistra over at Yahoo Sports, friend of the program, highlighted this the other day. But going back to March 19th in terms of star players, so guys who I think have either been All-Stars or All-NBA is kind of how the NBA defines it when they look for punishing teams who sit multiple star players in a game. Tom counted 21 guys out on March 19th. Some of them were season-ending, Joel Embiid, Victor Wembanyama, and things like that. But others you looked at, Tyrese Halliburton, Jalen Brunson, who's been in the boot for a while and just got out of that. Going on down the list, Nikola Jokic, LeBron James, all of these players that on pivotal teams, we've talked about this with the Denver Nuggets recently with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic out in some pivotal games and some people taking umbrage of that and their coach coming out and basically saying these guys are hurt. If they were healthy and played, they've been playing. But for so many teams, Dad, the Knicks, the Nuggets, the Lakers, the Warriors, teams that we maybe don't put on that top line with Cleveland, Boston, Oklahoma City, but ones that we know are in range, it does seem like so many injuries to their star players have that looming specter over our head of what we saw in last year's postseason, right? In the Eastern Conference where, yeah, Boston was the best team, but they also caught a postseason run where every team they played seemed to have a star player who was sidelined for significant time in that series. And as the best predictor of future injury being past injury, this is somewhat worrisome this close to the end of the regular season.
Yeah, and the league obviously frowns upon and has fined teams for sitting players without what they deem good excuses. But if I'm a team A, I don't care about the fine. It's a $100,000 fine, I think, for the first offense, I think. I don't care about the fine. And B, when there's only basically 10 to 12 to 13 games left, I think you can get away with sitting players more because there's nobody 100% healthy. Everybody has some aggravating injury that they're dealing with. The severity obviously differs, and age certainly is a product of it as well. But I would think that the league would have a much tougher time as teams are legitimately resting players who are not so-called injured, but you can get away with putting them on the injured list because it's so late in the season. Everybody has some type of ailment.
No doubt, everyone's dealing with something, but there is right now this interesting sort of dichotomy in the NBA where you've got a handful of, I would say the Celtics and OKC are kind of in a different spot. Like those are big juggernaut rosters that are now developing some time together. Boston certainly has a ton of time under task with the core of that team in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum for as long as they've been together, but even the other guys surrounding that. Oklahoma City on the younger side, but now a few years that they get to stack together and all make work. But you've got some of the up-and-comers, right? Houston in the Western Conference, what the Detroit Pistons have become in the Eastern Conference. These teams that are just mashing turbo through the regular season because they're young, they don't yet have the postseason build-up, all these different things. And then you've got the old guard. You've got the guys that we've all talked about here where, Dad, everyone's not 100%, but that's different for different people. And when you're a team relying on a 35-plus-year-old at the center of your lineup versus a team that's got, 23 and 24-year-olds working into the prime of their career, that's a different set of calculus for everybody involved that does make this postseason feel interesting because we always give way and say these teams with veteran leadership, these teams that have been to the mountaintop before have such an advantage, but where's the line of demarcation on that going up against a team who is a little bit younger and more resilient physically getting into those spots and maybe just doesn't know what they don't know?
It's interesting you mentioned Detroit. Coach of the year, I thought Kenny Atkinson would have it wrapped up, but how about J.B. Bickerstaff from Detroit of how bad Detroit was last year, and they're in the sixth slot right now and are going to be there. They have, a 5.5 game lead over the 7th seeded Atlanta Hawks. So Detroit's going to be in the top 6 for as bad as they were to in the top 6. I think it's a battle between JB and Kenny, who coach in the Cavaliers, as far as coach of the year.
You a little worried about the Cavs at this point, man? Real.
Nope.
Last 3 games, been a real rough patch for the Cavs, man. A lot of blown leads, wondering if things are starting to throttle down for them here. You got to be a little worried after all the win streak stuff.
No, I'm not worried at all, as you can possibly tell in my voice. Yeah, losing 3 in a row, giving up 123 to the Kings, 132 to the Clippers. Lost to the Magic before that as well, 108 they gave up. Listen, this is where you talk about playoff experience. We talked about, do you have to go through the heartache of losing in a big series in the playoffs before you can climb that mountaintop fully? We went over some of the past champions, how they did, like the Celtics, like the Denver Nuggets, and Cleveland hasn't done that. There's also something to how are you playing going into the playoffs if you haven't had the playoff experience? You talk about an experienced team, an experienced playoff team, flipping the switch from the regular season to the playoffs. Is there a worry with the Cavs without a ton of playoff experience? Some certainly, without question. But being able to they have 69. They have 13 games left of finishing strong and going in strong to the playoffs. Or right now they're kind of limping, losing 3 straight. They're kind of limping, and you just wonder how they're going to be playing going into the playoffs.
To bring it back full circle as we limp towards the playoffs for some folks here versus not, you did get me distracted, Dad, with the Coach of the Year betting on DraftKings Sportsbook right now. Kenny Atkinson is minus 1,000 to win Coach of the Year, followed by J.B. Bickerstaff at plus 600. And let me just say, as someone that watched, one of their first full Detroit Pistons game the other day, fun-ass team. Cade Cunningham is a dude. Jalen Duren has football shoulders. That guy's a football player body playing basketball incredibly physically. But overall on that team, Malik Beasley was shooting the lights out of the gym. Fun team who I believe I saw the stat during that game has won more games this year than they did the last 2 seasons combined. So good for Detroit in general, that fan base, that franchise, a team that was, one of the, beloved franchises of my childhood with the early 2000s Pistons that beat the Lakers group with Ben Wallace and the rest of those guys. It's fun to see that franchise back in a place after being on the skids for so many years. But I go down to third, Dad, in the Coach of the Year voting to bring it full circle. J.J. Redick's at plus 4,000. They are a higher seed in the Western Conference than the Detroit Pistons. They've been without LeBron James in stretches at the beginning and the end of this season, had to absorb a massive trade in the middle of the deadline, and this is year 1 for J.J. Redick. Like, color me impressed by the job that's been done by a guy that was doing podcasts with LeBron James this time last year and is now coaching him, navigating all of this with one of the prestige franchises in the NBA, which I get maybe doesn't factor into the award, but Dad, they were the 2 seed for long stretches of this season. Like, if they move up a couple of other spots, I do think there's going to be more of a conversation around that before it's all said and done.
What is JJ's odds? What?
Mine are plus 4,000, so he's a distant third.
Oh, so it's really a lot of distance between first and second, and then a lot of distance between second and third. But listen, you're right. I mean, coming in first-time head coach and leading this team where they were, like you said, the 2 seed when LeBron was healthy, is pretty impressive. I don't think he has a shot for it. I think it'll be one of the other 2, and I think it'll be Kenny Atkinson. But he has, for question marks around a first-time head coach, he's done a pretty good job.
Coming up next, let's talk about the big money Boston Celtics and what I learned at SoFi Stadium last night. Next on Gojo and Golic. We'll get to the sale of the Boston Celtics here in just a second. As a reminder, there are a few things in this life you can own as stable, dependable, and even in this economy that will appreciate as well as a sports franchise. Good work if you can get it. But, Dad, much like you in the midst of March Madness yesterday, where for anyone that missed it off the top of the show, while the rest of y'all were watching basketball, my dad was busy taking in some wrestling right now. The NCAA wrestling tournament got started. It's my dad's great love, and so he spent his day parked in front of the couch watching it go down there. I actually got my little cheating on college basketball late in the day, got a late invite to go over and check out the CONCACAF Nations League final that was going on at SoFi. So it was billed. You had the U.S. playing Panama in the first game, and then Mexico and Canada were playing in the late game. These were the semifinals, and now Panama, who beat the U.S., which came in about halftime of that one, and seeing Panama sneak a goal in stoppage time at the end to beat the U.S., Mauricio Pochettino, the new manager, not thrilled with the effort from the boys in the red, white, and blue. Some lineup issues and some things they're going to have to remedy, as now we get the geopolitical discomfort of the third-place match that's going to be the U.S. versus Canada again, which, after seeing the way those Canadian fellas looked yesterday going and playing against Mexico, got me a little worried because they were bigger, faster, stronger than them the entire game. Mexico just snuck a couple of goals in at the right spot. But, man, Dad, it was I didn't realize the U.S., we were secondary on the card. This was a Mexico home game. That was the team that everyone came to see. That stadium was filled for Mexico versus Canada. And I have never seen a crowd, first off, completely packed SoFi, awesome to see. I have never seen a crowd attack the Wave the way the crowd of fans of Mexico attacked the Wave last night. The stands were rumbling. It was going in both directions. You got yelled at if you weren't getting up and doing it. It was nice to see that in 2025, someone still values the Wave, something that I just thought was kind of a throwaway and a nod to the before times at sporting events now.
Yeah, I think now there are times when the Wave goes that you feel if you do the Wave, you'll be ripped, so you sit down and don't do the Wave, when the Wave was obviously such a big thing. I saw the video you sent from the stadium. My God, it was absolutely packed. Well, listen, we know soccer fans are the most rabid there is, and unfortunately to the negative side as well of just how violent and dangerous they can be at times, to the bad side, but also to the good side. There is not a more passionate group of fans, and forget the country, in the world, because that's the number one sport in the world is soccer, and just how crazy those fans are. Man, yeah, that is something when the U.S. team is playing on U.S. soil and they were the undercard.
Well, and like, based on play, deservedly so. Like, of the teams I watched, they were the one that looked the most tepid out there. And this is coming up on the backdrop. The other thing I forgot as you're in the stadium and you see the advertisement for what's coming up, like, we host the World Cup next year. And based on what we saw, we're a long ways away from being the home team that's going to show up and show out while hosting the World Cup. So, again, new management taking over, trying to get the program built up and ready for that moment. But it was a tough scene there. And I also got duped because I didn't realize Panama and the flag, same colors, red, white, and blue. And so I'm sitting around in the section thinking, all right, we got like-minded folks over here. And then all of a sudden Panama nets that goal. And I realized I am full on in the Panama section, and they were thrilled for their team, deservedly so, after a great win. So cool scene and vibe in SoFi for that game here. U.S. versus Canada. We'll see if it's got the same venom and vigor that the U.S. versus Canada hockey match. Somehow I don't think that's going to be the case given each nation's relationship with the sport, but we'll wait and see on that. We'll also take a look right now, Dad. Our poll, tater tot or hash brown, coming off the top of the show. Right now, hash brown in the lead, 53.5% over tater tot at 46.5% with just over 600 votes. And Dad, that surprised you at all?
Well, when you say hash browns, I don't. What's our definition of hash browns? Is it what's served on a breakfast plate? Or is it like the McDonald's hash browns, which is really a bunch of tater tots put together?
No, the McDonald's hash brown is better than a tater tot because there's none of that gushiness in the middle. It is just thinner.
It is a tater tot.
It is
it is a tater tot.
It's technically a tater tot, but it's better than a tater tot. It's called a hash brown, not a tater tot.
This is, I think, the work of Big Hash Brown in making this happen is they've been able to brand something that upon further inspection is clearly a tot, just flattened, and call it a hash brown. And now that's what a lot of people in the comments are citing as their example, especially in the fast food realm. So, Dad, this feels like a win on technicality because, to your point, hash browns I associate with being looser, able to be moved around here, truly a side dish in the way it occupies your plate, and not as formed as a tater tot. That's part of, again, tater tots are just portable potatoes. It's a portable hash brown. And so that's why I think the McDonald's hash brown in particular kind of toes that line in a way that's unfair to our poll.
Yeah. When I think of hash browns, I think of sitting down for breakfast and seeing actually, and the hash browns you get for breakfast have to be really browned on the top, right? I mean, they have to be. That's part of the hash brown lure. But you can break up the hash brown and mix it in with your over easy eggs. Oh God, I'm getting so hungry. When's the show gonna end?
Oh,
my mouth's starting to water.
I know, me too.
Jesse has another blood draw and she's fasting.
Oh, that's right.
I want a McDonald's hash brown so bad.
Think about how many McDonald's hash browns you could buy for $6.1 billion. A group led by Bill Chisholm, the managing partner at Symphony Technology Group, has agreed to purchase the Celtics for a valuation of $6.1 billion. Kind of like we see with NFL contracts and player contracts across sports where there's no there's no max salary. They just surpassed the sale of the Washington Commanders at $6.05 billion to be the highest price paid for a franchise in North American sports history. This far surpasses the record number for control of an NBA team. Remember, Matt Ishbia bought control of the Suns for $4 billion. Dad, this one, has some stipulation. Members of the current ownership group going to stay on in an advisory role while they're in the midst of this, but this is interesting to me, Dad, just insofar that the Celtics' prior ownership selling at the height, right? You're just coming off a championship run. It looks like you could be in the business for more of that. And now selling this off at peak valuation here. It's like day one econ, buy low, sell high. The Boston Celtics prior ownership. And they're still always buyers. I think that's also kind of a reminder of the unique space, especially in this current economy that sports occupies, which is the values of these things do nothing but go up. All the conversations about ratings and all that nonsense fly in the face of what we know, which is that these franchises are going to continue to appreciate at a way that is just wholly unlike anything else.
I think the previous ownership bought the team in 2002 for $360 million. So in 23 years, it went up to $6.1 billion. I mean, you want to talk about what to own now if you got the scratch to do it, is to get it. Remember, the top valued professional sports team in the world, not the country, in the world, is the Dallas Cowboys at just over $10 billion. So you can say what you want about Jerry Jones, the GM, but Jerry Jones, the businessman, certainly has hit a high note. And I do like what Bill Chisholm, who leads the group of the new sale, he said, this process to buy the team started just under 50 years ago when I had my 7th birthday and attended a game at the old Boston Garden. I was hooked ever since. I've been a rabid fan ever since. I bleed green. I love the Celtics. I love that. Started when he was 7 years old, and I'm going to buy the Celtics someday.
Yeah, we'll see if he can match the freak show fan energy that someone like Steve Cohen brings to the Mets and is really a poster, or if he's not about that action. That remains to be seen. But again, he can do what he wants now because he's the one with the ball. It's his ball, and he can take it and go home if he likes. By the way, a brief update here before we get ready for this, that, and the third and the final segment. According to Tracy Wolfson, Cooper Flagg will play today for Duke. John Shire telling her he will not be restricted in any way. So get your bracket dumpsters ready for another day because it appears that Duke and Cooper Flagg are not coming here to be your victims against Mountain Men Hoops today. Next on Gojo. All right, let's wrap up the show the way we always do. Send you off into the weekend. We're like the last class before recess right now, before spring break. Go and prosper and enjoy March Madness. As always, on your way out, when you do, download, subscribe, rate, and review the show, though. Leave us a 5-star rating and watch us live Monday through Friday for at least one more week on the DraftKings Network. Our YouTube channel, Gojo and Golic. Subscribe and hit the bell, and make sure you check out and are ready there for one more week of fun around here coming up next week. We'll have some fun guests. Stop by some of our favorites to enjoy our final week here at DraftKings. We thank our guest today, Louis Riddick, ESPN, NFL, and college football analyst, for stopping by to profess his love for Tyler Shuck, the quarterback name you haven't heard this draft cycle that Lou put on your radar. If you missed that, check it out wherever you get our pod or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. Guys, let's start off with this, that, and the third. We mentioned March Madness, certainly the story going into the weekend. And Amir Khan, the manager for McNeese, rapping, bringing them out with the boombox before games, has become a big-time star in his own right. He's got name, image, and likeness deals. I saw the team guys holding up his gear in the background while he was being interviewed. And after the McNeese win last night, he got to show some love to the team after. Here he was getting his moment in the sun post-game.
He is aura. Amir Khan, your McNeese Cowboys just pulled it off. They beat Clemson. What were you thinking? What were you thinking as that clock went to zero?
We got our first win in school history, you know. So McNeese is the hometown school, and, you know, for us to get a win in March Madness, you know, it means the world to me.
What was the boombox blast in pregame?
No Switch by NBA Youngboy.
Will that be back Saturday, or there'll be a total switch up again?
You know, we really don't know. You know, everything we do is
we got the boombox out now.
Yeah, it is. It's right there, you know. Right there.
With Wild Wings. With Wild Wings here. Here we go, man.
Put it on. So
I love Buffalo Wild Wings.
I'm a big fan too, so, you know, so for me to have this, it means a lot.
What is it like being with? What's this guy like for you guys? What's he mean to you?
Oh, talk to him. He's aura. This is aura right here.
Tell me what he means.
This is really my man. Hey, this my man. And he be in the gym early every day. He getting rebounds. Like, he for real. When he said he had Wilt Chamberlain numbers, he really lived by that. Like, for real. Like, tell him, boy, pop it.
The funny thing about all this is I said off the top, when we get these mascot figures around sports teams, I tend to at some point push back a little bit when it feels like they're getting more attention than the actual players, because I always think it's the folks on the court doing it, whether, you know, even in conversations about the coaches, that deserve the credit. but it really does seem like everyone is celebrating the fact that this is a guy that's busted his ass for them as a manager. He has gotten this fun moment of fame for his personality and role on the team, and the players, Dad, clearly love it and are clearly all in on showing love to a guy that usually occupies one of those unsung hero roles on a team.
That's the thing. And again, there have been mascots that have hit the spotlight, but a team manager, I mean, signing NIL deals, I mean, boy, the landscape has changed. But you're right. I think the coolest thing is the players are behind it as well. And the players, the ones on the court winning the games, have bought into it. I think it's just such a neat story. He seems to have a fine personality for it with the big boombox, but the players buying in and having fun with it while they're making this run is a pretty cool thing.
We all play collegiate sports here. We all understand that there's a lot of different people that make an organization and a team go throughout the course of a long season, and most of them never are known by the outside world or see the light of day. So it's cool that they all get a chance to share a guy that they know and they see behind the scenes, like he mentioned, day in and day out doing the dirty work for them, get this moment where everyone now gets to recognize him. And so the McNeese run continues with Amir Khan at the helm, Dad, and the boombox that I'm sure is going to rotate various sponsors now and make them all a whole lot of money.
Yeah. And to your point, the managers, the trainers, the behind the scenes people that you never see, they're the ones that put in the work. I mean, they're the players obviously practice and show up for games, but the amount of time managers and trainers and the support staff put in is really amazing. And it's pretty cool to see that kind of brought to the stage.
Jesse, let's move on to that. What do we got here?
So, the day your child's born, biggest day in your life, happiest moment of your life. One former Notre Dame basketball player, however, might have a different take on that.
This a couple times, so clearly I've peaked. Even if I have a kid one day and my wife's like, hey, isn't this the best moment of our lives? I'd be like, yeah, it's up there. I beat Syracuse when they're #1 in the country. Yeah, that baby is not even ranked. Okay, it's not even a top 25 baby. It's not even a 12 seed baby.
So he was on the Notre Dame basketball team in 2012 that beat Syracuse, and he's just like, yeah, I don't know if having a kid's going to live up to that moment.
As someone that stormed the court for that game, I can assure him he's right. That baby's got a high bar to clear. That game was fun as hell. That team was fun as hell. And there is nothing quite like that. And this goes all the way back to, Dad, this is an original super producer Brandon Newman take on the show when we talked about the notion of having to save your wife or save your child. He said, I don't know that baby like that. I've known my wife for way longer than I've known my kid at this point. And so I've got to side with her. The baby's got to know it's earned, not given. And that seems to be the takeaway here.
It seems like
would drown my husband myself if it was like save. I would put a bullet in his head if I had to.
Oh my God.
For my kids. Yeah.
Wow.
Are you kidding me? And I hope he would put a bullet in my head for the kids too. Yeah. Are you kidding me?
I mean, that was no one. Jesse, I will kill my husband if prompted by the children.
Listen,
we've said this before. No, my husband and I have literally had this conversation. The house is on fire. It's like, get the kids out. Either one of us. You leave the other one behind for the children. Brandon should talk to someone.
Listen, it's easy to joke about, because you don't know the baby yet, but it's so true. You just took it to a really dark place, though, Jesse. I'm not going to lie. I'm scared of you right now.
Yeah, that was. I'm a little worried for your husband right now. I might put in a call to some people just to kind of have the house on watch.
No. You don't have to be worried for his life unless the children are in danger. Then, yeah.
Unless maybe the DoorDash order goes awry. Let's get to the third here, Jesse, and break this one down and save you from further indicting yourself on a microphone right now and
It's
your
okay.
husband's safety.
He doesn't watch the show. What could go wrong with this situation? Okay, Klarna and DoorDash have announced a partnership, which means you can finance your DoorDash option. So instead of paying up front, you can pay in interest-free installments later down the road to, quote unquote, line up with payday. And let me just tell you, if you have to finance your luxury food delivery, you should not be getting the luxury food delivery.
It seems like a pretty easy line to draw in the sand, Dad, on this one. I'm sure some people will take advantage of it here. I have succumbed to the sweet siren song of DoorDash and delivery. I try and major in delivery because I understand it's not always the best for the restaurants involved in this, but this seems like one, Dad, where it's like we all got to stop and take a beat and maybe just get in the car.
I mean, but Klarna, who they're partnering with, is going to be on the New York Stock Exchange. Their adjusted operating profit went from $181 million this year to a loss of $49 million last year. They're pretty successful. So this is a head scratcher to me because I'm
convincing people to finance food delivery.
Jesse, I'm with you. If you have to finance DoorDash, and I'm not into the food delivery, and we always had this discussion with Mike, you and Jake and Sydney, all my kids. Sydney once DoorDashed a Sprite, a drink, when she was in college.
Wait, a singular Sprite?
To be delivered.
Just one?
Yeah. I mean, she was drunk in her defense.
Oh, okay. I get it.
Yeah, I do feel like that's important context. Listen, you know what, Dad? You and Mom like to go to the casino and light money on fire there. That's what brings you joy. I got a value I put on my time. I know what it is given the context and the circumstances. And if that's how I choose to light my money on fire, this is America, and I'm allowed to be a willing dumbass on some low-stakes measures from time to time.
And now you can finance it. Think of that. Wow. Interest-free.
Oh.
Check that one out here. No interest. We'll give you a great rate on downloading, subscribing, rating, and reviewing this podcast. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the madness. We'll talk to you on Monday.